API Conference, Elevating API Literacy.
Hi everyone. Hi. Hi. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. So good to be here. Um. Good morning, everyone. Cool. So I am Uchechukwu azubuko, and the picture you see on the screen is currently my favorite picture right now. But it's identical to the picture I took while I was a kid, and so the only difference is that I didn't have a mustache back then. Yeah. So thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here to speak to every one of us this morning. The funny thing is that if I hadn't switched from commercial class to science class in SS2, I probably won't be here speaking with you all. Yeah. So from what you already know about me, I'm the lead front-end engineer at One Liquidity, technical content creator at Mastery, and co-organizer at UGS Nigeria. And so what I do at One Liquidity is that I lead the front-end engineering team in building highly impactful fintech and liquidity projects using blockchain technologies. And at Mastery, I write content. We own a lot of us. How many of us know Mastery? Front-end engineers here. All right, cool. So it's awesome. So it's particularly the leading Vue.js platform, and then the largest financial supporter of the Vue.js framework. So you can't be in Vue and not know Vue Mastery. So today I will be talking about patterns for a clean front-end application with valid data. And the goal of this talk is to lead us to a place where we begin to birth cleaner front-end applications by validating client-side data. So for every solution, there's a problem. And so the problem is that for every application, we work with data as front-end engineers. Be it data from a form, be it data from the backend. But we don't want to display data that isn't well-pleasing to a user, and we don't want our users to always be frustrated. Think of a B2B or a B2C, particularly B2Bs, right? I think the most tasking part has to be onboarding. You would hear people getting back to you to say that we are unable to upload documents, we are unable to fill a form, it's telling us an error that we don't understand, and all of that. All of that can be avoided if indeed we handle our data rightly so. And so if you're a software engineer here and you don't have issues with handling data, you deserve an award for real. And but for the most of us, I'm pretty sure that we fall in that bracket, and this would really help us be a front-end engineer or a back-end engineer, particularly front-end engineers. And we will be exposed to a tool that would allow us to overcome these challenges. Some of us perhaps are already exposed to the tool, but the goal is that we come to a place where we can control our application data and not allow it to control us. So usually what happens is that when data is transferred into a JavaScript front-end application, for the most part of it, because it's coming from an API, we don't know what may be coming per time, right? We don't know what may be coming per time. And we want to figure out a way to establish a process for which error handling can be well handled. We want to establish a place where we can mitigate errors that may happen per time, right? And so to avoid this error, what usually would happen is that we come up with some sort of defensive programming by coming up with null checks, trying to check if there's a variable existing, things like that. And we do this again because TypeScript in itself is not present at runtime. And so even if we have like TypeScript helps us to check types and all of that, we we might not really have the best opportunity to do that when we are getting data from the backend. And so when we end up writing our checks like this, I mean, this suffices, but at the end of the day, this is excessive code and it's not so clear. It's not maintainable. It's not readable. And then we don't want that because, again, the goal is that we want a clean front-end application. And so what tool are we going to be exposed to? Zod. If you are a React developer in the house, you are probably very much aware of React states forms. And then if you are a Vue developer, you're aware of Vue validate or vValidate. But in as much as these packages or libraries help us to validate our data, the truth is that they do not present us with capabilities that Zod essentially brings us with, or brings us or provides for us. And the good thing about Zod also is that if you are a JavaScript engineer, just vanilla JavaScript, or TypeScript engineer, even though Zod is type first, Zod can allow you to validate your JavaScript alone. And so that's a good thing, really. So Zod is that tool that can help us to validate data, and it shines so well with TypeScript. I'd advise that if you're a JavaScript engineer, just take a look at TypeScript. Don't worry if you haven't used TypeScript before, because Zod in itself is pretty beginner friendly. And so, like I said, we had the case scenario where we were writing a lot of no checkpointers and all of that, and we're trying to validate our data by creating all of those helper functions, all of those checks. But with Zod, we don't have to go through the stress of writing lots of those checks. Because again, what if something else changes at runtime? Zod allows us to create schemas that can allow us check all our data and ensure that there's right before we make use of them. All right. It ensures that we have a process of exactly working with the right data. I'm pretty sure that a lot of us have experience when we use a dashboard or an application and we see undefined or we see NAN, right? Exactly. I'm not going to call out anybody's application here, but one of them is on my phone. Yeah, one of the apps is on my phone. But who said I should call it out? Okay, so one of the apps is on my phone, but we don't want these things happening in our application. So the best thing we can do is to take advantage of a library and a package that allows us to do so. And Zod has come to the rescue for that. So again, the essence of this conference is to promote API literacy. And I best believe that the best way would be to take us from a beginner perspective, right? So I'm assuming that no one here is an expert, and we would take the approach of figuring out how to use Zod from the place of a beginner. I don't know why my icons are not showing, but I'm a fan of icons. That's meant to be an icon. Okay, so again, like I said, making use of Zod is meant to be easy and straight out of the box you use Zod. All you have to do is integrate it within your application using whichever package manager you desire to do so. With npm, you can use npm install Zod. With yarn, it's yarn add Zod, and pnpm install Zod. And then the next thing you do is to import Zod as Z from your provider. Next step would be to create a schema. So think of creating a schema as a way to represent your data. So if you have strings, or like I have basically just outlined a table that describes the way for which primitive types can be declared, like the structure for primitive types that we essentially work with can be declared. And so a string would be declared with z.string, right? The z we imported from Zod, and the same follows for every other type. All right, cool. And so the next step would be having declared and represented our data. We want to then process our data. The need for providing the schema for our data is so that we can set our data in a way that we are now able to write rules for our data. Okay. And when we have passed our data, when we have defined the schema of our data, the next step would be to pass our data. Passing the data means providing a schema in a way that we are able to validate what we have received, if it's right or wrong. And so what we have here as an example is that I have defined a schema object. I've defined a user schema that represents the object of a user. So think of it, the user as an object has name property, email property, and age property. The username should be a string, right? A minimum of 3 strings and a maximum of cool. And the same follows for emails. It should be a string and it should be an email. And so if a user doesn't have the @ sign, because we know that the @ sign is peculiar to emails, right? If the string doesn't have that, it would fail. The same follows for age. It should be a number, an integer, and positive, because nobody can be -1 year, right? I have then created an object that perhaps we receive from the backend. What our schema, our Zod, can help us do is at this point where we are passing the data, we can decide what to do with it or not. So why you are seeing undefined or NaN, it's because there hasn't been a check at the point of receiving the data. So who can tell me what would happen if this, if this is passed? Would it fail or would it pass? It would fail. Why? It is null. Any other reason why? Oh, is that all? Right? Any other reason why? What did you say? Amazing. Oh, you guys are sharp. Cool. I thought no one was going to catch that. Cool stuff. So awesome. I thought no one was going to catch that. Okay, so for those asking, there's a white space here, right? And we all know emails do not start with spaces. And except to trim that before sending to the backend, it will fail, right? And so awesome stuff, really. Wow. We have sharp minds here. Awesome. So this would fail. And upon failing, it then brings us to our last step in using Zod, which is to handle the error. Because when it fails, we want to provide a way for our users to be, to find reason and communicate properly with our application. So when things break, they know the reason why it broke. And so in a place where data is not available for you, instead of seeing undefined, they can probably see NA, right? I think that's pretty better. Or they can see an image that just... The idea is that our app then becomes more usable and more enjoyable. And so with Zod, we are able to write custom errors and define custom errors within our schema. And so what has happened here is that for each, a custom error has been provided. And so when this fails, it then would render an error to tell them, please enter your age, right? And when the age is invalid, if indeed they write a number, because remember the first check was it had to be an integer. They had to be an age. So if they write something and it's it's not an integer, it has to be a valid number. And so that's a very good benefit of Zod. But that's not the end when it comes to Zod. So when working with Zod and TypeScript, Zod really helps us to define a type rather than having our code being redundant. And so we don't have to be bothered about rewriting a type, and we can just use type off to infer the type. That's about the talk for today. Before I leave, there's a fastest finger session from what we've learned and something to be won. So this is the test, and that's the link. If you are able to solve the first two, are going to have a prize from me. Yeah. So I'll give us 1 minute to tidy up, get the link, or scan the code. The top two, and it will be free and fair. We can show the database. All right, so thank you, everyone. It was great to talk about how to build cleaner front-end applications with valid data. You can find me on any social platform as Uchechukwu. All right, have a good day.
API Conference, Elevating API Literacy.